I do want to welcome you this evening. Thank you for attending our Beyond the Ballot program tonight with the League of Women Voters. My name's Melissa, and I'm the library's Assistant Director for Outreach and Adult Services. So if you've got other ideas for programs or partnerships that you would like to see the library do, please seek me out, find me, let me know. This evening's program is one of several that we're having over the course of 2026. This is part of TADL's Civic Celebration, which is in honor of America's 250th birthday this year. This month's theme for March is voting and elections. So we've got several events that we're having this month. This is the first of a few. Some others that you might be interested in, just very briefly, this coming Monday, we'll have Democracy in Action with Voters Not Politicians. They're going to talk about their successful campaign to end gerrymandering in Michigan and other current ways that citizens can get involved in their government. Next Thursday, we will be joined with Rank My Vote to talk about ranked choice voting. And many of you have been asking me, isn't that a thing that isn't happening anymore? But we're still going to talk about that, and there's a lot of information to still know about that because even though it might not be a thing right now, it's still something else that maybe we need to consider for voting and for elections. And then another one that you might want to consider is on March 31st. If you missed our local press panel that we had at the end of February, on Tuesday, March 31st, we'll be joined by 9 and 10, and they're going to be hosting another local press panel on the role of civility in local news. So we hope that we get to see you at one or many of those. Please pick up one of our bingo sheets. We're available for kids and adults at the table on your way in. Our entire celebration for this year and what topics we're going to be covering each month, as well as the website where you'll be able to find everything that we're doing, and then also library resources about each of these topics will be highlighted on that page for each month. The bingo sheet's a lot of fun as you do things that are related to civics and your citizenship here. You'll be able to check off, and so you'll be able to check off one of the boxes tonight because one of the boxes says attend the library program. And then when you get one bingo, you'll get a small prize like our little Cradle of Democracy pin that you'll see a lot of staff wearing. And if you get two bingos, you get a bigger prize. So please participate in that with us. And now I want to do just a few introductions. So this evening's program is going to be run for us and the panel moderated by Alice Schumann with League of Women Voters. She is the Voter Services Co-Chair for the League of Women Voters of Grand Traverse area. The League is a volunteer, nonprofit, nonpartisan organization whose main mission is to educate and empower voters, and we're working with them a lot this year in the Cradle of Democracy Civic Celebration, so thank you so much, Alice, and League of Women Voters in general. Then we will be joined later by Sarah Lutz and Sam Gedman. So Sarah Lutz has spent the last 15 years of her career working in election administration, first as Chief Deputy Elections Director for Grand Traverse County, then as Deputy City Clerk for Traverse City, and now as the City Clerk for Traverse City, where she was responsible for much more than elections, I hear. And then Sam Gedman is the Chief Deputy for Vital Records and Elections in Grand Traverse County. Sam has worked in elections for 3 different states over 10 years in experience with this. And he's also a TADL board member. So thank you so much to both of you for coming as well. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Alice now. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa, and thank you to TADL for the wonderful celebration of democracy all of 2026. And the League of Women Voters is delighted to be partnering. One of the things we're doing is we're here every second Tuesday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. in the lobby with a voter education/registration table. So we're there to answer questions, to help people register, and to remind people that there's an election this year. So thank you to Michelle Howard and Melissa McKenna and everybody at the library for making this partnership possible. You've been reminded as you walked in that we're taking questions at the end. The layout for today is that I'll be presenting for about 30 to 40 minutes describing the framework of the election processes in Michigan. And then Sarah Lutz and Sam Gedman will come up and it will be Ask the Clerk. And so feel free to fill out questions. Somebody's already given me one. You're welcome to fill out more than one question. There's no limit. And we'll do about 30, 40 minutes of Ask the Clerk. Okay. There's actually a bingo tonight for the number of times I think this is a touch screen and I touch it and try to make it move. That was one. Okay, so for today, this presentation is going to look at Michigan voting processes in 3 sections: before the voting starts, during the voting, and after the voting. Before the voting starts, we have registration. The candidates have to sign in. The proposals have to be approved. The machines have to be gotten ready. People have to be trained. And the polling sites need to be set up so that they can be opened and ready to go. During the voting, we are confirming voter eligibility, whether people are voting absentee early or at the election, on election day. People are casting their votes. The clerks are dealing with special situations. And in Michigan, we now have 3 ways to vote. You can vote absentee, you can vote early in-person voting, and you can vote on the day of election in person. And we'll be talking more about all of those. After the voting, at the polls, there are steps taken by the election workers to very carefully get everything secured and the results ready to be shared. At the county level, there are steps to assemble the result totals. The Board of Canvassers confirms the quality of the processes and the results. And then at the state level, they're busy resolving issues, posting the official results, and doing post-election audits and other checks. And this goes year-round. It never really stops. So let's talk a little bit about Michigan. Michigan is very special in 2 ways. We are very decentralized and we are very transparent. So I am told that we are the most decentralized because we're Michigan, we must be the best at everything. But of the 8 states that administer elections at the local level, we're the largest both in terms of population and geography. So when you add it all up, we have 83 county clerks, 281 city clerks, 1,240 township clerks. So these 1,604 clerks work with 1,521 election commissions, 83 boards of canvassers, plus there's oversight and assistance from state level. That's a lot of people. And if you add in all of the election workers, we're talking thousands and thousands of people that are involved in an election. Now, the upside of that is it would be very difficult for a handful of people to alter the results. There's just too many people involved across the board, too many looking over everybody's shoulders. But with thousands of people, we are human, and it is possible for mistakes to get made. So an important part of the processes we're going to review tonight are all the checks and balances, so that if mistakes are made, they're found, they're corrected, training is updated so that mistake is less likely to happen in the future. It's an ongoing process of building the quality into our election systems. The second thing that Michigan is special for is that we're very transparent. So any member of the public can observe the tabulators, so the voting machines that the ballots get slid into, can observe a testing ahead of time to see that if a ballot with these things checked goes through that machine, the machine tape shows those choices, that the election has happened properly. All polling sites are open for observation to anyone. There's a public area at every polling site. And then the board of canvassers, which we'll talk about more, when they meet, those are public meetings, and that's when they're going through the paperwork from every precinct and checking carefully to see that the processes were followed. And any member of the public can observe those. In addition, trained and credentialed members of the public can be challengers at in-person sites and at the AV boards. And in addition to just watching, they can talk to the precinct chair if they have concerns. If they think some part of the process isn't being followed, they can talk to the precinct chair. And we'll probably have questions about that when we get to the Q&A. That would be 2. Okay, we are going to follow the journey of a vote. And if you look along the side here, or if you look in the poster in the back, or if you picked up a handout, the Secretary of State's office did this 10-step, yes, and if anybody needs a handout, our Vanna White in the back, also known as Charlene, will happily hand those out. I think one up front, Charlene. Yeah, and one over. Okay. So anytime you have questions and you don't have a blank, if you raise your hands, we have a whole staff of Happy League volunteers who will bring you cards and pencils. The 10-step process begins with proof of voter eligibility. If you think about an election, there's 3 parts to any election. You need voters, you need something to vote on, like candidates or proposals, and you need an election process that brings those 2 together and puts out results that are accurate and trusted. So voter registration goes on all year in the state of Michigan. You can register online most of the time. And we have little bookmarks in the back that get you to michigan.gov/vote, and it's very easy to register online. You can, and you can register in person at the clerk's office, really anytime, except after 8 p.m. on election day, right? But anytime the clerk's office is open, you can go and register. The online voting is not available in the 14 days before an election. In that 14-day window, just because it takes time to process new registrations to confirm the information that's on that form, you have to do it in person if it's in the last 2 weeks. The voter registration information is put in by the clerks to the qualified voter file, which we'll be calling the QVF. And that is a statewide database with the voter registration information. It is very secure. There's limited access. There's multiple security layers to keep that. But that is what feeds the poll book. So when you go to vote, and you go and you fill out your little form and they look you up online, or in the old days they would flip that piece of paper till they found your name. That's the poll book. And even though it's electronic now, it still works basically the same way. It's so that the election inspectors know that you are in fact registered to vote in that precinct. Keeping the QVS current is something that is an ongoing, never-ending process. People move, people die, and the clerks on an ongoing basis are checking public records. The Secretary of State's cross-checks driver's license applications and address changes with the QVS, and so if you update one, it updates the other. I keep looking over here. I've got, usually when we're doing voter tables, if I have a question, I actually have to call the clerk, and now I just go like this, you know? But we also check to make sure people aren't registered in other states. There's a group of states that have joined together to share information so that when people do move to another state and forget to change their registration, we can see that they're not here anymore. So that's the voter side of it. On the other side are the candidates and the proposals. And so they have, I want to show people this calendar that the clerks work with. It is, I think it's 20 pages, something like that. And all throughout the year, so on March 2nd, each county clerk, what did you have to do? Must inform local clerks whether their county will offer county-run early voting. On March 9th, the local clerk has to tell the county clerk if they're going to do the county-wide early voting or if they're going to do it by themselves. Coming up on March 23rd, incumbent justices of the appeals court, et cetera, have to say whether or not they're planning to run, and they have 3 days after that to change their mind. So just to give you a feel for this is going on all the time. And so when the candidates have followed the correct processes, Sam keeps that list at the county, right? You know who has filed according to the deadlines and who is going to be on the ballots. Proposals have a whole other set of requirements, but either proposals make it or don't make it and meet those requirements and make it to the ballot. And that's true of local millage proposals, local other things that we might be voting on locally, ordinance like the height ordinance and things like that in Traverse City, but also for statewide proposals, constitution changes and other statewide proposals that end up on the ballot. All of this is held together by the Michigan Constitution, by the laws, and by the processes that have been set up. So that was step one. Okay, step 2 and 3 is where the ballot and tabulator programming happen and the logic and accuracy testing happen. So when I'm talking to people at the table, at the voter tables, I talk about we set them up, we test them, and we show them. So setting up first is that in the electronic system, which is the EMS, is a system which is dedicated to having the right candidates on the right ballots with the right choices, like vote for no more than 2 or whatever the choices are. So the candidate lists and the proposals get verified, the ballots get designed, approved, and printed, and the machines are programmed to be able to read so that each machine is specific to a precinct and is able to read the ballots or precincts, I guess, but is able to read the ballots that are expected in that tabulator. Then the machines are tested both by the county and by the local clerks to make sure that they're working as expected. And if anybody has ever programmed software or put in a new database, you know that no matter how careful you are, you do have to test it and fix it and test it again, and then you're happy. The third step is that then we show them. So the clerks post when they're going to have the public testing. Anybody can go and watch, and a selected set of samples are tested, and so people can see that the machines are working as expected. Everybody can see your blank ballot online once they're established. If you go to that michigan.gov/vote, put in your address, confirm who you are, it'll show you what your ballot's going to look like once that's all the testing and all the ballots are ready, so you know what the choices are. Step 4, now we're into actually casting a ballot. So we've done the pre-work, and now we're going to go through the 3 different ways you can cast a ballot in the state of Michigan. So one is absentee voting, and in this case, someone has requested that they be sent an absentee ballot, filling out a form. There's a process to request it. In Michigan, you can check on that request form that you would permanently like to have absentee ballots sent to you. But it all begins with a request, so nobody gets an absentee ballot that they haven't asked for. Clerks confirm, other thing, post office does not forward absentee ballots. So the absentee ballot gets sent to the address that's on the registration. You can, if you're a snowbird, indicate that during certain time periods you have an alternate address and it'll get sent to that. But that's not the same as the post office just forwarding it based on what's on file. When the ballot comes back to the clerk's office, the clerk confirms that the signature on the outside envelope of the return ballot matches the signature on the registration. And then those ballots are stored securely until Election Day, when they are processed, and using the same processes that we'll talk a little bit more about when we talk about Election Day processes. But it's a bipartisan team of poll workers that tabulate the absentee ballots. And I don't know how well you can see there the important "did you," but it's on your little brown ballot on the back, and it asks you, I have to do this with my glasses, sorry. Did you sign in the box below in your own handwriting? Did you put your ballot in the envelope? And then you have to return it to the clerk by 8 p.m. on Election Day. So if you put it in the mail and the post office doesn't deliver it until the Thursday after the election, it's not going to get counted. It has to be in the clerk's hands by 8 p.m. on Election Day. But you are also signing, so in the little tiny print, it says, I assert that I am a citizen of the United States. I'm qualified and registered to vote. I am voting in conformity with state election law. I marked my ballot and I put it in, I can't read all these words, but put it in the envelope all by myself. And I'm returning this ballot to the clerk's office or giving it to a member of my immediate family or household, or I'm putting it in the mail. And then you sign to that. So those are all the things that you're attesting are true, and you can be held accountable if those things are not true. Early in-person voting is new. I think we've done it 2 years now in the state of Michigan. It is in our Constitution now that it must be available for at least 9 days before the state and federal elections. So that would be August and November in even-numbered years. It can be available at other elections at the discretion of the clerk. And those 9 days are going to be the weekend, the 2 weekends and the week before the election day. So if there's an election day on Tuesday, 10 days before that is a Saturday, Sunday. You go through the whole week, another Saturday, Sunday, and then not on the Monday, because I hear the clerks have a lot to do on the Monday before the Tuesday of an election. So townships, villages, counties, they can agree to have one site, a shared site, or they can decide to do individual sites. And it's really up to the township clerk. It's up to the local and county areas to work out what they're going to do. The qualified voter file keeps track of who has voted in the early time period and whether they were issued an absentee ballot. So if a voter comes to the early voting site and wants to vote, they fill out that little form that we all fill out with your name and your birth date and your address, thank you. And you're also attesting that you're a US citizen and you're registered and qualified to vote in this precinct, and you're making an application to vote. You sign that. You can also be held accountable for what you signed there. But the little qualified voter file will say, hey, they have an absentee ballot. And so then there's a whole set of steps of either maybe they have it with them. I work at the election. Somebody did bring in, my dog ate my ballot, and she had all the little pieces. So there's a process where, even without the little pieces, you still have to attest that it's lost or destroyed, and then a new one is issued. But also the qualified voter file keeps track of all the ballot numbers. So if that supposedly eaten ballot showed up, that number would flag as in, nope, that was reported lost. So it's very connected and double checked. The actual process is the same. You get a ballot, you fill it in, you push it through the machine, you get your sticker, and you go. Election day is like election day always was. There are bipartisan teams of election workers take an oath to administer the election according to state and federal laws. Voters are identified and checked in the poll book, which was downloaded from the qualified voter file. And they confirm the election worker confirms they've not already voted and they don't have an absentee ballot. They complete their ballots and they push them through the tabulator. So that goes on all day on the election day. At 8 p.m., the polls close everywhere in the state of Michigan. There's one poll closing time. And the election inspectors confirm that the number of ballots cast, so the number of ballots that have dropped down into the tabulator and the number of ballots that the tabulator says they have, and the number of voters that were checked in and given ballots, that those things agree. And if they're different, that we know the reason why, that it's explained. And then the ballots, the paperwork, the electronic record of the tabulated votes are carefully sealed into tamper-proof bags and boxes. And the ballots are securely stored at the local level. And then some of the copies of the paperwork stay at the local level, but some go to the county clerk's office, and there's a section that will go to the Board of Canvassers. I don't have anything up here that tells me what time it is, so, okay. Then we've moved on to step 8 and 9. I know I have to look behind me and I feel like that's rude, but here we go. The unofficial results are what get posted on a Tuesday night. And the county clerks review the paperwork from each precinct for completeness. They load the tabulator totals into a secure system. And then the unofficial totals, they must be posted on the state, and they're often posted at the county level. We post them here on our county level. These are unofficial results. We can't say that often enough. They're unofficial because they still need to be reviewed. So the Board of Canvassers starts meeting, and the Board of Canvassers is a bipartisan team, 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, and they hold the public meetings where they review the paperwork for each precinct, and they have a detailed checklist of things that they go, confirming that they were properly sealed, that all of the forms have been filled out, that all the poll workers signed, everything is complete, and that the numbers on the paper tapes match the numbers on the posted unofficial totals. And absolutely, sometimes they find things like, oh, this, I don't know, one time one precinct had all zeros in another county, not here. And it was because somebody, how you have to press save? Well, they didn't, so their little media was blank. But they still had all the paper ballots, it all worked out, but that's the kind of thing that's the difference between unofficial and official. If the board has questions, they speak to the township or city clerks to clarify the documentation. And then when they're satisfied, they certify the results. That goes to the State Board of Canvassers, which follow a similar process. And then the certified official results are posted. The last step is post-election. So there are post-election audits, which the state of Michigan conducts post-election audits, and this is so complex, I have to go to my cheat sheet. But the state does procedural audits where they check more than 70 key points in the election processes, including that the election notices were done right, the testing was done right, the equipment was stored properly, all the paperwork gets assessed. They go through the pre-election, election, and post-election procedures that we've just talked about to make sure that the jurisdictions are meeting their requirements. Because, there's a lot of steps, and there's something human about wanting to go, that doesn't seem important to me. But in fact, they are all important. And the clerks are taking their jobs very seriously, and the reviews are putting another layer of confirmation on top of that. So we're not going to take questions from the floor, but if you need another card, if one of my lovely card ladies, and then they will hand count a certain number of precincts to confirm that the results match the ballots. And then all the materials are retained for a specific time period. There are other audits and checks. The county level does some of these at the direction of the state. So, and everybody does what can we learn from this? How can we change our training so that our poll workers or other, whoever made the mistake can not make it again in the future? Sometimes there are recounts. There's very special circumstances when those can happen. Those are done supervised by the Board of Canvassers following certain processes, and those are available for public. I'm not sure what the word is. You can stand there and look at it. You can't say anything or do anything, but you can see what's going on. And all along, the clerks are getting ready for the next election. So we're going to do a little, I call this my commercial timeout, while Sam and Sarah get settled in up front. We are moving on to the second half of our evening, which is Ask the Clerk. And so please write any last questions you have and give them to our people. I want to tell you that there's lots of ways to learn more. So in the back on the table with the red tablecloth is a little display that has these 3 QR codes. And the first one will take you to the Journey of a Vote poster that we've been working our way through. The second one takes you to the Secretary of State's office, where they have some really cool short election videos that if you're curious about some specific thing, you can watch that video. And then the third one is to Michigan's election security website. Also in the back, we have our nifty bookmark from the League of Women. I told you this was our commercial. That has both a link to michigan.gov/vote, where you can register, change your address, look at your ballot, all kinds of things. On the back side is vote411.org, which is the website that the League maintains before every election for every candidate that we can get to respond to us. We ask all the candidates in a race the same 3 or 4 questions, and we put their answers side by side so that you can do a comparison of the candidates and make a more informed vote. So this bookmark is there. We also have these nifty little yellow brochures called They Represent You. And it lists your elected representatives, both at the national and state level, and has all of the townships and cities in Grand Traverse County. Has the clerk's phone number, because I keep saying, call your clerk if you have a question, and there it is. But it also has like the meeting times for your township. So in order to be more civically engaged, this is a great resource. The next thing, this might be the last thing in the commercial, the hands-on way to learn more about the election process is to become an election inspector, also called a poll worker. So in the state of Michigan, you have to be at least 16 years of age. If you are 18 or more, you need to be a registered voter. If you're 16 or 17, you have to be a Michigan resident. You must not have a felony or election crime conviction. You must not be an election challenger candidate, member of a candidate's immediate family, or a member of the local board of canvassers. And you must affiliate with a political party. So in Michigan, we don't have to join parties, we don't have to officially say, but for balancing the staff at the polling sites, there is a requirement that there be bipartisan staffing. And so you need to say that you belong to some party, whichever one if you had to choose, that's the one you would choose. And so you can apply at your local clerk's office, or if you go to michigan.gov.vote, there's more information there. And I think clerks are always looking for more poll workers. So, and every township, so lots of people, even if you have a Traverse City, you live in a township, and you can be a poll worker. You don't have to live in the township. You can be a poll worker anywhere in Michigan. But please do consider it as a great way to learn more about elections. I already told you about the bookmarks, and we, again, want to thank the library. So Sam and Sarah, please come up. And if my little card gatherers could give me... More coming. Lots of questions.
All right. You recognize, did you have any ringers in the crowd?
So while that's happening, I want to thank Sarah Lutz and Sam Gedman for coming here. They are our experts. And Sarah, could you please tell me a little bit about your background?
Okay. A little bit about my background. Well, you heard my bio earlier. I've been in the election arena for about 15 years. I started out at the Grand Traverse County as a chief deputy elections director there, and then moved over to the city as the deputy, and then most recently I am now the city clerk. So I've run elections for quite some time. I've been through lots of changes.
Yeah.
If I could add, Sarah was Deputy Clerk of the Year in 2024.
Oh,
So
right. Deputy Clerk of
2023
the
too.
Year.
So
Yes. Nice.
outstanding in her field.
Yay. We do have the best here in Grand Traverse, yes. And Sam?
Oh, well, yeah. So I've done just a little bit of everything in elections except actually run for office.
I haven't done that either.
Yeah, I've been a poll watcher. I've been an elections inspector. I've canvassed door to door for candidates, and so when I was teaching down at the University of Mississippi, and I got involved in some local elections there and was working the polls, and then through some family circumstances, we ended up moving to North Carolina, and I went to volunteer there, and I was working there, and I as a volunteer, and it turned into a job, and then the job turned into a career very quickly. So I was fortunate enough to be an elections director in Durham County, North Carolina, for an election cycle, and then circumstances moved me up here into northern Michigan, and we've been very happy. My family's been up here working at the county clerk's office for 6 years now. So I've been the chief deputy for 6 years. took Sarah's place there, and been the elections manager and chief deputy clerk. So
Okay. I'm getting some great questions in here.
I can answer questions about Mississippi too if we.
Oh, all right, all right. In case
Those elections are
anybody's
wild,
moving.
so if you want to throw those in there.
All right, well, we are getting, and the number one question that we're getting at voter tables now is about the SAVE Act. And we do try to explain to people that it hasn't passed yet, so it's really hard to say what the impact is going to be. And there are bills at the state level and at the federal level, but they all circle around the question of documentation of citizenship. So the questions, what do we have? Where did it go? SAVE Act. Please speak to the, oh, well. So we'll do this one in two parts. Let's talk about citizenship, and then we'll talk about some of the other things that may be happening. So what happens now I mean, we all agree that citizens should vote and non-citizens should not vote. But what keeps that, how is that working now?
I guess I'll take this one. Currently, when you register to vote, anybody that registers to vote, as you complete the voter registration application, whether it's online, in person, on the form, you are attesting that you are a U.S. citizen. So it's on the voter, the individual, to indicate that they are a U.S. citizen. When we receive the form, we input it into the qualified voter file. We, as local clerks, do not have access to any citizen databases. So we are going off the knowledge based on what the individual is filling out. Now, if they're filling out and they have a driver's license, your driver's license, you provide your birth certificate and your proof of residency when you're getting your driver's license. So there's that check there. But we don't have access to a database to figure out if somebody is a citizen or not, based on the voter registration form.
Yeah, I think that's a great point in that, this would require a level of federal oversight and federal involvement beyond the scope of how elections are administered locally down. So any change in that system, any requirement to verify citizenship can't really come from the local level. And that would involve a change in how elections are conducted locally and nationally.
Yeah, I think that might be as much as we can say. Until it passes, we don't know. And until it gets through the courts, we don't know.
Which has really been our experience with almost every step of the way in elections administration. We went through this similar things with voter ID for years. What would that look like? What would it entail? And that you have debate, and then you have something that passes, and then there's a court challenge, and then there's eventually some administrative rules that come out from the Secretary of State's office, and it looks totally different from inception to practical application. So time and again, these things take a while to work out through the system.
Yes, they do. And speaking of identification, one of the questions in here is, what if you don't have a Michigan driver's license or a state ID? Can you register to vote?
Yes.
And what would that look like?
So when you complete the voter registration form, you can enter in either your driver's license or state ID number, or you can enter in the last four of your social security number. And that number is put into QVF, and the system talks to the Social Security Administration.
Okay. Perfect. For when somebody registers online, what do you do to verify that information?
So we are provided the information into QVF, and then we print out a voter ID card and we mail that to the address provided. And as long as it doesn't get returned, then we're assuming that it got to that person. And then the qualified voter file also speaks to the CARS system, which is the motor vehicle side of it, so the driver's license side of it. So there, it's going to compare information. So if you're registering online and you enter in your driver's license, it's going to pull in information from there. So your signature on your driver's license is the signature that pulls into the qualified voter file.
Can you move your mic closer so we can hear the question better?
Yeah. Okay, is that better? Does it sound better? Okay, thank you. So one of the questions is, how are signatures checked for accuracy? And it says, thinking old, infirm. I'm like, all right, you guys.
Nobody's
But-
old and infirm.
But I know that my hand is shakier, and so my signature, looks a little different. So how do you verify signatures?
So you always presume that it is the actual person signing. There's that presumption that it is them, but we're not, forensic forensic handwriting analysis, but you look for commonality points on and if the signature is drastically different, we will either send a letter, and we'll send a letter, we'll call, we'll email if we have various ways of contacting, and we'll say there's a discrepancy, we need to have another signature. Or if the person is able to come in, we will get a secondary sample and we can upload a secondary signature into the system so that we can see it in the future. But we do take in account age, illness, injury. So we do, and you can typically see enough characteristics to verify. But if there's any question, we reach out to the voter.
That's a great also point on local control and local elections, and why it's an asset to have people like Sarah and her staff and their team go out and actually do their due diligence on these things. If there is a concern, if there is a question, they can follow up with a voter and see if there's any reason to be concerned. That level of care and that level of understanding and empathy that they show for people, and also with the system itself, by just making sure that everything is fair and equitable, and they do a great job doing that. And that's not something you would always get in a larger bureaucratic entity if it were administered 70,000 voters, 80,000 voters by a small staff, or even at the state level.
Right, and one of the questions, which I'll find it here, is asking what did we mean by decentralized? So in some states, the state secretary of state runs the elections. In Canada, like the province runs the elections, and everybody who is at the polls or who creates that works for the secretary of state. Whereas here, it is your local clerk. And so you can, some of the townships are small enough, you're like, oh yeah, he broke his arm skiing. He must be signing with his left hand today. So that kind of knowledge of people helps get through this. So one of the things I didn't say was about the move ballots. So all of our absentee ballots and all of our in-person voting happens by 8 p.m. on election day. But we do have a process for people who are overseas, military or regular overseas, and theirs can come in up to 6 days after the date of the election. But there's also this, I know this from the Board of Canvasser observation, that there's signature curing. Can you talk about signature curing?
So in the instance where we found that there's an issue with the signature, or somebody forgot to sign the envelope, that happens frequently. We have a signature cure process, and that's where we will mail them, and we will email them the form, and we will try and call them. We really do try, and we have like post-it notes on all of these, the number of times, and then we follow up if we haven't heard. But they have until, was it 5? I can't remember how many days, 4 days after, yes, 4 days, the Friday, after the election, to provide us that information. So it's a form letter, and they can sign it, and then they can return it, the voter can return it, and we can attach it to the absentee ballot, and we can take that to the Board of Canvassers. And then the Board of Canvassers processes the ballot and adds the totals into the votes into the totals.
Okay, great. All right, we're going to wander around here. Is there any proof of the cost effectiveness of voting machines versus paper ballots being counted manually?
In terms of,
Sarah's eyes got really wide. She's like, count them manually? But anyways, go ahead.
well, no, I mean, I think just, you're talking about a labor-intensive process that would require multiple people and multiple levels of oversight on those people. So having something machine counted is verifiable, and it's accurate, and it's timely. If you were to bring in people, it's really one of those situations where if you ever had to do it, you ever had to see the different levels, the different number of races, and you want results in any kind of timely fashion, you really don't want the people who've been working all day to be in charge of complex math tallying at the end of the night. I mean, it's prone for error if you do something like that. And we get those kind of talks all the time, well, in France, they can get results by the end of the day. They count everything manually in all these different parliamentary systems. But, in a federal system where we have many races down ballot, it would be very difficult to tally those races accurately and quickly with a small staff. You would need large numbers of people, and that would, I don't think, be cost effective. If I were being, if I could editorialize, that would seem like it'd be much pricier, so, and prone to more error. But if Sarah wants to do that, I don't
Right.
know.
There goes my budget.
Local control is local control, so.
So I used to manage the pharmacy services at U of M, and we had to do physical inventories until we got an automated inventory system. And so it really was, counting pills, 1, 2, 3. And a friend of mine would go, oh yeah, here's Alice, 9,001, 9,002, 2, 1, 2, 3. It really is hard to manually count things accurately.
It is, when we do the post-election audits, the post-election audit is usually one precinct within your jurisdiction, and then within that precinct, it's one race, and you hand count all those ballots, and there's several of us doing that, and it's one race, one precinct, so no more than, if every voter, we're talking 1,000 ballots maybe, it takes several hours
To do just that one race.
to do that one race.
And then you'd have to do it over again
Yes.
for each race on there. We would not have results on Tuesday night.
No.
Probably looking for some new clerks too, I think.
Okay, so we have a bunch of questions about absentee ballots. And so this one says, there are lots of checks and balances and steps, but what is there to ensure that a worker doesn't just change the ballot? Doesn't
Alter the.
Yeah.
Oof. There's multiple people looking at the ballots. So the process in the absentee counting board is you have a team, you have your sealed envelope. The envelope is sliced open. The ballot in its secrecy sleeve goes to one person. The envelope goes into a pile. Then the ballot is taken out and placed in a pile, and then they move on. So there's lots of eyes. In addition to the team doing that, there's also, in our setup, I can't speak for all clerks, but in our setup, we have team leads that are roaming the room and watching and observing. So it would take another person to, I don't know how you could do that.
Whipped out a
like,
pencil.
whipped out a pencil, and altering a ballot like that, the machine likely would reject it.
And I would also add that that's a bipartisan team.
Yes.
So you would have to have, you're doing it in front of the eyes of the opposition party at all times.
Okay,
That ballot goes right into a sleeve.
so
Help me.
In an absentee counting board, it comes out of the sleeve and is set in a pile.
Well, we do them with the regular ones, Flat Township. And we just have a person take the ballot and put it in a sleeve as soon as it comes out of the envelope.
Yeah, some smaller townships will do them in precinct on election day because they don't convene an absentee counting board. But inspectors are also bipartisan teams, right? So
Yes.
when you're in the precinct doing it, it's still a similar process
Yes.
in that you have multiple eyes on it and bipartisan teams who are cordoned off. We do that, I think, Paradise Township, they'll do it in precinct, so will Grant and Union. I think Mayfield as well, but that does happen in some of the smaller jurisdictions.
Yeah, ours is pretty small.
Okay, so there's two halves to this question. Is it better to mail my ballot or put it in the drop box?
My personal opinion, Dropbox. Or walk it in and hand it to me. I love seeing voters, but yes, Dropbox.
Okay, and how are the ballots secured after they're collected from the drop box?
So my staff, I can speak again for myself. My staff or myself take a ballot container out to the Dropbox. We put it in the zipped container from there. We bring it back into our office. We count the number of ballots. They're checked into the QVF. And then after they're all checked in, they go into our vault, into a secure access control cabinet.
All right.
That's a fairly standard thing too. A lot of smaller jurisdictions that don't have that level of security, but they all have some kind of a locking container as a best practice, as a way to kind of keep those locked up. I mean, some smaller townships, it'll be, the Dropbox will even be at a clerk's home. But there's a way, those get secured in and they get logged into the QVF. And if you go to the MVIC, the Michigan Voter Information Center that the Secretary of State runs, you can see those QVF tags. So you can see where your vote was checked in and where it's waiting, remediation.
It's almost like you were reading the card from all the way over there because
I'm
You got
sorry.
X-ray
it
vision.
said, how do I know my vote got counted? So,
If we've received your absentee ballot and it's been checked in, it's made it to the absentee counting board and it has been tabulated.
And we can view it. We know.
You can
see
view on the MVIC or the michigan.gov/vote that we have received your absentee ballot.
Yeah, sometimes folks get confused that with seeing that there's a record of how they voted as opposed to that they voted. And we, by design, by law, by practice, have no way of
No
knowing
idea.
that, nor should we know that. It's secret ballot, and we can tell you that your vote was cast and that your vote was tabulated, but we couldn't say how it was done.
right.
I think it's important for everyone to know that all of those different pieces of paper, including the ballots and the paper they sign, goes into a specific container and has to have a seal. And
Yep.
two people, one from each party, put that seal on, and then they sign it.
Yep, they do.
Chain of custody.
Okay, next question. Is the QVF, the qualified voter file, public information? Like, can I look and see who's on the QVF?
You can request certain information out of QVF. Some of it is protected.
Okay. And can people find out which primary you vote in? Can they, because in Michigan, you get either the Democrat or, you get a lane. You get one ballot.
So individuals the parties have access to that information for a very limited amount of time by law in our primary system.
And that's only at the presidential
They'll only
primary.
get presidential selection primary only. Otherwise, there's no way of knowing. So people will request, a list of every Republican voter or every Democratic voter in a township, and their first response is always, "I'm sorry, I don't know."
No idea.
We don't know what ballot they requested or what ballot they filled out in the last primary. That's not information we're privy to. But because a presidential selection primary has a different legal definition and a different process, and you're not actually electing candidates, they have finagled something into the law at some point that allows the parties access to that information for a limited period of time. So I always tell people, talk to your political party if you want to
Okay.
have more info on that.
Okay. So we have some questions about voter assistance. So if someone comes to the polling and they have difficulty understanding the ballot or difficulty with language, what are choices? What happens?
There's several different options. So if somebody comes to the polling location and they need assistance, depending on the level of assistance that they have, we have what are called voter assist terminals or VATs. Ours, we use Express Vote is the term for ours, but it's a marking device, but it has audio and on it. So if somebody has difficulty reading, it will read the ballot to you. They can also bring in somebody to assist them, like a family member. For them to assist, we have to ask, questions. Are you having somebody assist you for reason of inability to read, write, or disability, or I don't have this memorized, but I think there's a fourth option.
It's not very flattering,
No.
but it's a common language that has to be shared, each time so that you can verify. And can't be an employer, it can't be a member of
Union rep.
Yeah, union rep. So there's some safeguards in place, but they can say, if the voter indicates this person's here to assist me, and the inspectors determine that it's legitimate, they can assist the voter fill out their ballot if they so choose.
In addition, a voter can request assistance from the poll workers. And again, it has to be a bipartisan, so two opposing parties have to assist that voter. And that's with the ballot. Now, they can't explain like a ballot proposal. They can read the ballot proposal to them, but they can't narrate it, interpret it. Thank you. I was lost for my words.
It's a nice thing too that we have these three ways of voting, right? Mm-hmm. So we talk about these things sometimes administratively as, very dryly, but if you think about it for a voter who might need assistance, having 9 days of early voting or no excuse absentee enables them to fill out a ballot in more, timely way, in a way that's more conducive to their lifestyle or to their needs. And these, it gives everybody a chance to vote how they see best fit, which is kind of a nice thing in our system right now. If you don't have to feel rushed on election day, you don't have to feel self-conscious about asking for help when there's a line out the door because you've got
Test anxiety.
What?
Test anxiety.
Yes, test anxiety.
Yeah, people have come in and said, I'm not ready to vote.
Yeah.
And have, given their ballot back and come back later. So it's nice to have those options in place for folks.
The first time I ever voted, it was a presidential election. I was very young. I was very excited. And I had no idea that there was more on the ballot than just the presidential candidate. And it was the old machines where you're like behind a curtain and you have to pull the little thing to open it. And, I get in there and I see all these choices and I was just stunned. I mean, it was beyond test anxiety. And somebody finally said, honey, do you need some help in there? So yes, it can be overwhelming.
Absolutely.
To see a longer ballot than you expect. What if somebody is blind or sight limited?
So our voter assist terminals, again, I said it has audio. That also has it's a toggle pad. That has Braille on it, so they can move through the controls and they can vote their own ballot. The voter assist terminal, which we also test before the elections to make sure they're functioning properly. You can turn the screen off and listen to audio only and go through, so it maintains voter privacy. So yes, there are options.
Yay.
And those options extend to anybody who wants to use it too. So if anybody wants to use a voter assist terminal,
It's touchscreen.
yeah, they're welcome.
It's like a big
to use
iPad.
It. It's kind of fun, and it's you can put the headphones on and hear the name pronounced if you need to or want to. And we test all that as well, so it looks great.
I might have to try that.
Yeah.
Okay, so a question that has come up at similar presentations to this are, and I'm not going to get the numbers right, but these are the questions that are asked me, that the qualified voter file has 7.3 million people on it, and there's only 7.9 million adults in Michigan or something, and why are there dead people on the qualified voting file? Really, are there that many people registered? So it comes in those flavors. So what can you say about the size of the qualified voter file and the dead people?
Could I say that if people would simply unregister when they pass away, it would be very convenient. In the same way that they register to vote, right? Yeah, that's the real difficulty is, right, if people, we don't know someone has passed away unless, somebody has been informed. There's safeguards in the system to prevent purging of voters, lawful voters before an election. So we can't do a systematic removal of voters 90 days before an election in bulk. And, there's other safeguards in federal law. It's the NVRA where you have to be dormant for 2 federal elections before you can be removed from the voter rolls. So the clerks are not empowered to just remove people because they're 104 years old or because somebody says they're dead. They need to have verifiable evidence presented to them, death certificates, something from another governmental entity saying somebody's passed away.
An obituary.
Yeah, something to do that. Somebody has to report that and make the effort to do it. And that's, usually on the individual level, small scale as opposed to large data sets things. So it's really burdensome to expect clerks to be able to go through forensically removing people that they have no evidence or justification for removing on speculation. So it's not really possible or advisable to remove certain people, and as long as they're not voting, which would be a problem, if it, it's really having them on the rolls might not look optically, it might not be the best optics, but it's not harming the integrity of the election. What would harm the integrity of the election would be if they were to systematically or arbitrarily remove people based on speculation or based on the word of somebody else.
I like it. All right. What should everyone have when they go in to vote, as in their IDs? Like, what should people have when you walk in to vote?
To make the process smoother, if you have your driver's license or state ID, obviously that's ideal. You can use a passport. You can use passport, tribal ID, concealed pistol license ID, ID from a educational institution, another form of federal ID.
Does it need to be a photo ID?
It needs to be a photo ID, yes. It has to have a photo on it. When the ID is for purposes of saying the person standing in front of me looks like the person that's on the ID and their name. Does it?
Yeah.
Doesn't have to have an up-to-date address, right?
No.
That's the other part of it I think people sometimes get confused with, is they think they have to go update their address at the Secretary of State's before they go in, but they don't necessarily need to. I mean, they should, just as a matter of course. And
Oh, yeah.
the motor voter law, if you register to vote, it should be updating it anyway, but sometimes the Secretary of State lags a little behind, but
But if somebody brings in their passport, it doesn't have their address on it, so
Right.
you're looking at both their identity and their name.
So when a really great clerk trained me to be a poll worker, it included that the photo ID is to confirm that that's the person.
Identity.
And they've written on the application to vote what their address is, and they've signed that that's their address, and that's the address that what they wrote down is what needs to match the qualified voter file. So you're checking 2 different things in 2 different ways.
So if you don't have a driver's license, can you get a state-issued ID at no cost?
The question was, if you don't have a Michigan driver's license, can you get a state ID at no cost? Does anybody know?
I don't know, that's a Secretary of State question.
I believe you can, but I don't know how timely.
Yeah.
So, I think it's one of those things where you'd have to get it in a bit of, I don't know how soon it comes, you know what I mean? You might be able to get a temporary ID, but it wouldn't have a photo on it necessarily, so.
Okay, and the other question on this card is, how many Democratic candidates are in the running for governor? Well, I'm not going to ask that question, but I am going to ask, when in your process, in that massive 20-page calendar, will you know who are the Democratic candidates running for governor?
Right.
So the filing deadline for the primary, so we should get the state list. I don't want to give a specific date because I don't want to be wrong, but it'll be sometime.
I've got the calendar over there.
Yes, it's on there, but I believe it's sometime in June, the state of Michigan provides us, so we have local filing, with local filing deadlines, and those we enforce that, and we have that information in front of us. The others, we have to wait for the state, so state senate or state rep in those offices that they don't file locally. We get those from the Bureau of Elections. They do a call to election, they give us our candidate lists. And I apologize, I haven't committed the calendar to memory quite yet, but it'll be.
The thing's on my desk, I'm always flipping it.
Yeah.
That's my next
I
deadline.
can work about 3 days ahead for the most part, but we will get that sometime here late spring, I believe.
Okay, so I'm going to slide over to challenges because we have a couple questions here. So I mentioned in the presentation that people can be credentialed to be poll challengers. What are some of the things that a challenger could challenge? What might come up?
They can vote, or they can challenge on the election process within the precinct, the polling location. They can challenge on, they can challenge a voter if they can challenge if they're like registered to vote, if they're a citizen. Wish I had my cheat sheet with me. There's very specific items that they can challenge on. They can't just arbitrarily challenge.
And then what happens? So if they say, I think this person moved and they don't live here anymore, what happens then?
So then the chair will speak with the voter. So the challenger cannot speak directly to the voter. The challenger has to speak to the chairperson of the precinct or the challenger liaison, but it's usually the chairperson. And then the chairperson will put the voter under oath, and then we'll ask them, questions to satisfy the challenge. If the challenge is satisfied, or the voter will be allowed to vote under what's called a challenged ballot. The challenge is recorded in the poll book, and the ballot is marked with the ballot number, and it's covered with a piece of paper or whiteout tape, and then the voter is allowed to proceed to vote.
But the ballot doesn't get tabulated
It does.
election day, right? It would get in the challenge status, right?
Yep, it has a challenge status.
I think the reason that we're a little bit slow on this question is because in practicality, it doesn't happen often. And that goes back to that idea of erring on the side of the voter. Like challenges have to be legitimate. They can't be speculative. People couldn't do several challenges in order to bog down the process. It'd be difficult. So if a challenger is in a polling location and they're impeding the voting process, there's the authority exists to tell them that they have to move on, and they can't be there to do that kind of thing. If they're just going to challenge every voter to slow things down, that's not
They have
allowed.
they have to have a legitimate reason, proof.
What we find most challengers do is get incredibly bored for the most part and wish they were just workers because there's very little to do, or they're there for the party to look at the list of voters and look at all the people who have come to vote so that they can report back for a voter, outreach efforts to get their voters to the polls on election day. But so operationally, while we see challengers, we don't see challenges with any real frequency in Grand Traverse County.
Okay. So what about provisional ballots? When do those happen?
Oh, this is my favorite thing ever.
All right, Sam's favorite thing is a
They're
provisional
unicorns.
ballot.
They don't happen much in Michigan anymore
For what?
because you
They're
have
unicorns.
same-day voter registration. You go to the clerk's office and you can properly register to vote. So a provisional ballot is a fail-safe measure under the law. It kind of stems from the 2000 election and the chaos there when people were, so in some cases, improperly removed from the voter rolls, turned away at the polls, and they had no recourse. So the idea now is you never tell a voter you can't vote. You say, I don't have your registration here. Is there some error, et cetera? And they would cast a vote and it would be kept in an envelope. The envelope would go back at the end of the night back to the clerk's office, and the voter would have some time to address the deficiency. So here's my proof of registration. I don't know why I didn't make it in the system. And then they can go ahead and add that ballot in later. Practically in Michigan, we don't see that very often because after 2018, we had the same-day voter registration approved. So if there was a dispute in a precinct and a voter said, I'm here, I'm registered, why don't you have me in the poll book? we could say, why don't you go step over here and speak to our clerk, and they can just register them there, and they can vote a regular ballot. So while the provisional ballot is a fail-safe under law, some states utilize it more than others. You'll see on election night, if you follow this stuff, on a presidential year, they'll say, Miami-Dade County, they have 485, provisional ballots they have to go through that could alter the vote totals. We don't have that here. It's very rare that occurs, but it exists under law to make sure that nobody, under any circumstances, leaves without having an opportunity to cast that ballot if they can go ahead and justify it later on, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. We used to deal with a lot of those in North Carolina when I worked down there, and they allowed partial votes there, so people could just show up at any precinct in North Carolina and vote for governor, even if they were in Asheville, and go in to vote in Durham, and it was a different thing and kind of fun. So I have sort of a PTSD, and I always share my horror stories with these with our clerks up here. Like, we used to do 700 provisional ballots, and it was
So our processes have improved. Let me go through the questions. So someone asked, the paper tapes that run out of the tabulators, and you have to do one for this person. There's a bunch of them, and they all get signed and everything. So the person at a different training said, well, in the past, there used to be like extra copies of the paper tapes put up for the press and is that still a thing?
Yep.
And can anyone get a copy of the paper tapes on election night, or is it?
So they'll post one up. The precinct workers will. Nobody can take that tape.
Okay.
They can take a look at it. They can take pictures of it, but they can't take it.
Okay.
So the thing that tape is generated from is off of the election, the tabulator, and that flash drive is taken out, and that's what we read in at the county to make for the unofficial results. And you can go on our website and look. If you want to see Traverse City Precinct 10, you can isolate that, and you'll see all the information that's on the tape. So it used to be a very common thing, on election night, people would drive around the county and look at the posted tape because it took a while for the results to come in. We're more instantaneous than that now, in the sense that when we get the results, we report them to the public. So that's really not as necessary as it once was.
Yeah, the turnaround's a lot quicker.
Okay. How are clerks trained for the job? And are they trained differently for city, township, and county levels? Did I already ask this one?
No.
Okay, good. How are they trained? How did you all learn what you know?
I would say immersion.
Trial by fire.
I would say immersion. Trial by fire, if you prefer.
No, there's a election accreditation training through the state of Michigan. So the state of Michigan Bureau of Elections, through the Secretary of State's office. There's election accreditation training, so it's a 2-day course, full day, very immersive. There's that. There's also continuing ed through the Bureau of Elections. And then there's various clerks associations. So I'm part of the Michigan Association of Municipal Clerks, and we have annual conferences and member education days, and we go to training for that. And yes, it's boots on the ground and getting into it and learning
Clerks
it.
supporting clerks, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of institutional knowledge and a lot of people willing to help. So the network kind of flies into action. If somebody has a question, there's usually a group email or something that goes out there, and everybody's quick to respond with their expertise and their knowledge. And, there's a lot of support for new clerks and people getting involved. And it's really, in terms of government service, it's a really unique fraternity to be involved in, because it's a very helpful profession, very meticulous, very caring. It's one of those, it's very rare if you're involved, where there's very little room for mistakes, and people are so helpful and understanding, and they just really support people in the endeavor to become involved in that profession. So it's really remarkable in that way.
Good. I like it.
And I can just
Cooperation.
yell across the hallway.
Oh.
My offices.
Okay, so are there elections for the positions of state board of canvassers and county boards of canvassers?
County Board of Canvassers, they're appointed by the political parties. So the chair of the political parties provides 3 names of potential candidates, and that goes before the Board of Commissioners at their annual meeting. If they can't decide, then the county clerk picks.
Okay.
State Board of Canvassers, I believe they are appointed similarly. They're not elected. I don't know the actual mechanism for how that occurs, but it's a balanced political process that requires Republicans and Democrats to be involved. So it's not stacked by any one party.
Okay. So talk a little bit about election precinct security. What are things that you do so that people feel safe going to the polls? Or does the county do? Or
Well, I mean, I think we think of it in terms of two-tiered, in terms of physical security and cybersecurity. It's difficult to provide a secure environment in an open setting. So by nature, a precinct, a polling location has to be open. You have to allow people to come in. You don't, they don't go through metal detectors. It's inadvisable usually to have armed law enforcement present at those kinds of places because that can echo voter intimidation. So you try to create an open and welcoming presence, but you certainly work with law enforcement. They understand that there's something going on. It's a big event. They need to be available if somebody's disruptive. Ultimately the precinct chair maintains good order in a polling place. And of course, the clerk is usually present in some fashion nearby. Sometimes difficult with elected clerks. They're not allowed to be in that area. But, we have, there's a perimeter, 100 feet. You can't be within 100 feet campaigning. If somebody breaches that perimeter, they're talked to either by the chair or the clerk, given opportunities, warnings. And if that doesn't work, then of course sheriffs or deputies might be called to help maintain order. But for the most part, it's a community event. It's a community process, and it's as good as the people who show up to it. So the responsibility is not always on the clerk and on the clerk's staff to provide security. It's on everybody to sort of maintain a community that's harmonious enough that we don't have these kinds of conflicts happening in the voting place, right? We don't allow people to politic in there or campaign in there. They're not allowed to wear paraphernalia. It's supposed to be the neutral place where everybody goes and expresses their political will. So those conversations shouldn't be happening. Those confrontations shouldn't be happening. And if they do, they're dealt with quickly and as discreetly as possible. And for the most part, we haven't seen any kind of an incident that would be, cause for concern. And I know that the goodwill of the community is unfortunately sometimes, but for the most part here, and I think in Grand Traverse County, it's what we have to count on, and it's worked out pretty well in our system and our process.
I mean, at the end of the day, the individuals coming into the polling location are your friends and neighbors. You know them. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you kind of police each other.
yeah, and I think it works well. In the league, we observe in different counties, and I would say that on the whole, the civility level in our polling places, at the recounts, and the Board of Canvassers is at a very high level. So a round of applause for Grand Traverse County, right? Okay. All right, we have a few sort of super technical questions. We're wrapping up. A lot of these questions have been asked and, answered incidentally. Okay, so how are expats, so people who live overseas, how do you verify them? Like, what precinct do they vote in? Like, how do you verify them in the voter file?
So somebody that is overseas, so military and overseas move or UOCAVA voters, can apply. It's Federal Postcard Application, FPCA. So many acronyms. The FOB is different.
It's my favorite acronym.
I know.
I just want to work it in if we can later.
That's different though. But so if you live overseas, you can register to vote at your last address stateside. And that's what we go by.
Okay.
And Canada is considered overseas for this purpose, by the way.
Yes, Canada is
There
considered.
was a dispute.
Well, there's a
Somebody got
lake.
mad.
I mean, it's not overseas, but we've got some water.
We use the term overseas, yes.
Right.
It's pejorative.
If you're not within the community.
Yes. Okay, so as we know, sometimes the school districts run across county lines, and certainly other
So do
things.
cities.
What?
I said, so do cities.
Yes, exactly. And isn't Elmwood Township in Leelanau or something? Yeah, okay. But how does the clerk keep track of who to give what?
In terms of,
Like when it's time to do the Board of Canvasser review and the voter, how do you
so
get
the
the
county
voter the
clerk
right
is the
ballot?
filing official where the majority of students in the district lie. So in Grand Traverse County, that's Kingsley Schools and TCAPS. But we also have Forest Area, Manton,
Benzie.
Benzie Central, sort of touching in our area. So we program ballots. When we program ballots, we have a number of voters. We'll look at Paradise Township is going to be all Kingsley schools, but once we start moving out a little bit, we'll get into, Green Lake Township will have some Kingsley and some TCAPS.
Buckley.
Oh yeah, Buckley too.
Benzie.
Yeah, there's a lot. So we program those races when we do the ballots. They're school board races, they're bond issues, and we make sure that those precincts have a number of ballots required for each voter in each one. So you're able to sort of break it down on those metrics and say, Green Lake 2, Precinct 2 will have so many TCAPS ballots and so many Kingsley ballots or whatever the case might be, and have those distributed on election day. So we'll program every race for every school district, and then we'll just subdivide the precincts based on their school districts and what ballot they should have. The clerks are meticulous. I mean, they rarely, if ever, I can barely recall an incident when somebody got the incorrect ballot style. There's, horror stories when somebody almost did, but, for the most part, they're very this is a Buckley voter, this is a TCAPS voter, and they have those, they'll have two ballot styles in a precinct. They'll make sure to give everybody the right one. It'll show up on their poll book when it's programmed in so that they have that indicator. And they get what they need, right?
Okay. So a couple of these are related to law changes. I'm going to ask people who asked them, talk to League of Women Voters. Afterwards, we have an advocacy side. Oh, am I getting away from the microphone again? I have this great little person up here. So we will be happy to talk to you about what is happening on the advocacy side, but Sam and Sarah really aren't in charge of changing the laws so much as they are of implementing them. But I do want to share this one. Who can tell us about the steps to get a nonpartisan ballot for the U.S. representative? So that would change things for sure. And there's a question about money in elections, and we'll be happy to answer that. But this last one, are there any changes to the Michigan voting process under consideration that you know of?
We get legal updates from time to time about bills that are in front of, the legislature and committee, and we have the MACPAC and these various, clerks organizations that will share and express a sort of an opinion on some of these things that come up. I know that was an unusual circumstance that clerks ever would weigh in on most of these issues, because it's, I don't want to say unseemly, but there's, if you're the neutral arbiter of an election and you're in charge with administering the election, expressing strong opinions about those things is sometimes shouldn't necessarily, it should be done very carefully, if at all. I know that ranked choice voting was something that the clerks felt strongly enough about on an administrative side to weigh in on. And then that sort of died on the vine in terms of, that constitutional amendment doesn't look like it's going to make it this cycle. I believe that's already been determined. But, there's not too much. I mean, we've talked, I know there's primary dates that have been, the calendar is always a point of contention, especially with early voting. And we've seen some developments in sort of the off-year primaries in some of the school districts. the millages failed where they hadn't previously and they've talked about, maybe that's a product of the calendar. They need to do things with the calendar. So there's not much right now that those things slow down as you get close to even number years. So when you're in an election year, they don't tend to change the rules.
I know.
Closer to the election, but I don't want to tempt
Please don't
fate.
change the rules.
Yeah.
Right.
Can I tell you one thing that I would like to see happen? That
Sure.
happens in other states that I wish we would do in Michigan. If you'll promote me a editorial moment, and if you want to earmuffs for this, you can. But some states, it is permissive for 17-year-olds who are going to be 18 on election day to vote in the primary prior to that election. And we don't do that in Michigan. And I've seen that in other states. And we do pre-registration in Michigan, but if your birthday's in October and the election's in November and the primary's in August, some states would let you vote in that primary. Michigan doesn't. And, I think that's something we should look at.
That's interesting. Sarah, any last words you want to share?
No, just that if you have any questions at any time, call your local clerk. We love answering questions. We prefer answering questions. We welcome them.
Yeah, this party never has to end. You can come by 8 to 4:30. Gov
Monday through
Center.
Friday?
Yeah, we're there.
Except major holidays.
All right. Well, thank you, Sarah and Sam, so much for coming. This is very, very well appreciated. And thank you all for coming out. I know our road commissions have done a brilliant job, but Mother Nature really slammed us, and I really, really appreciate your coming out. So thank you very much.